Holy and indeed Christ. This is Michael Elliot, who's the commentator at NAWA, of course, and he also has some documentaries on HighSpots TV, which I used to have a subscription to and really enjoyed it, and I need to get another subscription because not only have they got great wrestling content, they've got this kind of stuff too. He's been very kind to send me a couple of documentaries, and I picked the first one I picked was the one on the Crocketts, and this one on Florida wrestling, because I didn't know much about it. And it's the great thing is it's a kind of companion piece in a way to that first great documentary. This is great too, but it has similar cast of characters. So you have Dusty Rhodes featuring so strongly in both of those, and it's a similar story too. The cross-pollination of this was enormous. The Mid-Atlantic area in the first documentary about the Crocketts, in the first one I saw, is all about them becoming incredibly popular and then things not being as popular and eventually the whole thing falling to pieces. And similarly, that's the case here. Incredibly popular. And then not so popular, and then trying to bring that back and not really succeeding. Now, there are some lovely, because I didn't know an enormous amount about Florida Championship Wrestling and Florida Wrestling. I mean, I knew, but not an awful lot. I mean, I know about Eddie Graham. I'd forgotten that Your Voice was Gordon Soley on that, and there's a big piece about Gordon and how respected he was as a commentator. And you have Lance Russell and others, but really he's the one. And I'd probably agree with that. But you've got the talking heads here are superb. In that you've got Funk and Briscoe and Kevin Sullivan and Bill Apter and J.J. Dillon and lots more. And it gives you the history, which I didn't know. Cowboy Luttrell, he fought Jack Dempsey. As a wrestler, he fought Jack Dempsey. Your influencer boxing this and got his jaw broken, and that kind of retired him from wrestling. So he bought the territory. Had Jerry Graham, Dr. Jerry Graham in there, Eddie and Dr. Jerry, bad guy tag teams. You've got Bruno Sammartino talking about them. It's great. You've got a great load of legends here. And it is testament to the way that this works that Michael Elliott allows them to talk. He's got a narrator, and I'll tell you who that is at the end, because he waits to the end to tell us. But then he sells Cowboy Luttrell. So as I think it's Terry Funk says, he was a man's man. He had one eye over here and one eye that looked over there, and he sells the territory to Eddie Graham. You got Harley Race telling it exactly how it is, and Steve Kern, who was a big part in Florida, said that Gordon Soley, there's a big piece about Gordon saying that I, as someone who did promos, had a tendency to ramble, but Gordon always pulled me back. Austin Idol's on there describing Gordon Soley as a Walter Cronkite type. He had the legitimacy. You believed him. And that's important in the roll-up, circus carny kind of feel of wrestling, really. Now, Eddie Graham was a big figure, big man, big figure, big in the community, big in politics. You got Jack Briscoe as his first big champion from 69 to 73, and also there's a comment here that Eddie convinced Vince McMahon, Eddie Graham convinced Vince McMahon Senior to make Bob Backlund champ. There was a possibility of others, including, I can't remember who it was, but it made him champ, and it didn't work that well. Now, Florida was so popular, it even played in New York. He turned Dusty face, did Eddie, to become the American Dream. And, you know, Dusty's interviewed. He's quite happy with his own work, and he has every right to be, actually. And as he says, I was exec producer before the world was known. I was a writer and all of that. And yeah, he was. And some of the similarities between this and the Crocketts documentary are that there's a plane crash here as well, in that Bobby Shane died, and Gary Hart, great booker, great manager, really so good. If you haven't seen his work, go and have a look at it. Calmly brilliant. He lost an eye in that plane crash, all of that. We've also got covered the first time, because I've seen it in of course in WCW and in Mid-Atlantic, but the first time that Kevin Sullivan really went to the dark side with the Purple Haze, Mark Lewin, and as people said, never mentioned the devil. People just, you know, thought that. And as he says, he's not proud of doing all of this, but that was the way of life back then, he says. And it's left at that. We don't have any other comments, but it's just great. And they lived their gimmick. They wore their robes wherever they went, even if they went out to get a piece of pie. And it was so popular, Florida, massively popular. Then Dusty goes to work with Crockett. And then there's some concern about Eddie Graham. And Black Bart talks, who passed recently, didn't he? Talks about there being a card called Lord of the Rings or Lords of the Ring, should I say, and all the wrestlers getting stiffed on the payoff by Eddie Graham. That's the intimation. That's the allegation. And they got half what they were supposed to get. And Dusty is interviewed saying he thought that too. He left and took wrestlers with him, including Ron Bass, who's in this documentary, Barry Windham, Magnum TA, and Eddie's son, Mike, says that he gave part of the territory to Dusty for free, and really, Florida wasn't really prepared for that pullout, really. Of course, the suicide of Eddie Graham is covered, and some of the it's posited that maybe he was in deep with some bad people in business and had some business deals that went wrong, and also they say, and it's extraordinary, that the first he had to shoot himself twice, because the first time he shot himself in the mouth, and the shot was a bit skewed and it blew his cheek off. So he had to, blew the side of his face off. So he had to try again and succeeded that time. Extraordinary. And you've got a similar situation with the Crocketts coming in, and it's CWF this, of course, as you know. Did I say it was Florida Championship Wrestling? No, it's CWF this. And the allegation is that Crockett and the Crocketts destroyed CWF, is the phrase that's used, with no Soli, no more Sportatorium filming there, and within 4 or 5 months it was absorbed into the Crocketts territory, really, or the Crocketts work. And one of the interesting things, which I didn't even know, and I need to go and have a look at this, is that Dusty Rhodes brought this back. He put a load of money into it as is it called Pro Wrestling Federation? Is it PWF? And it didn't draw very well. He left then to go to the WWF. American, my polka dots. Yeah. But it didn't draw. Dusty didn't draw. Excuse me, I had to sniff up then. Didn't draw. That's extraordinary, because the feeling you've got is that whether he did well or not, he was always on top. And here he wasn't. But I need to have a look at that short-lived federation, because it is on YouTube. And who narrates beautifully? Gennard Soli. His son narrates. And that is a beautiful moment. And the feeling here is of warmth and loveliness, and a similar story, a sad, wonderful and then sad similar story. But that just makes it all the better, because that's the way wrestling is. It shouldn't be, but it is. And this documentary shows it beautifully. Ta-ta.